Recently, I've had a lot of people asking me about my Battlefield 2042 settings, so in this video, I'm going to cover all of my settings and basically how I make my UI and game look the way that it does, and then we'll jump into some PC tricks to keep your game running as smooth as possible. I'll do my best to explain the important settings in detail, but do be ready to pause the video if you need to look at something pertinent, since there are a lot of settings. For video settings, I run all low settings for max FPS and low latency. I'll link Freethy's video below as I run his config, with the only thing being different is future frame rendering set to off. As far as colorblind settings go, I have all of my world colors set to pastels. Shout out to AsheBF for putting me onto that. The point of making them pastel is so that the UI isn't cluttered with bright colors, since there are currently no opacity sliders in the game. For the same reason, I have my hit markers set to a neon color scheme of choice, as I want to be able to see my hit markers clearly. Damage-based shape off for cleaner hit markers, and I set incoming soldier damage the same color as my enemies, so I can correlate the two. Sound is all personal preference. For the mini-map settings, the infantry size is also personal preference. I do recommend setting air and vehicle minimap size to 300 so you can see incoming threats as early as possible. I'm not going to cover the controller settings as I play on mouse and keyboard, but I do have a video on how to find your best sensitivity on controller and mouse and keyboard, and why 121 is the best coefficient. That video will be linked in the description, so do go check that out if you're interested. But the main thing to note here is you need to have all your settings set the same regardless of what input you're on. So match the controller settings to be the same as the mouse and keyboard and vice versa. And if you're on PC, just turn off or down all aim assist or dead zone settings. You just want them to match up, and turn off any settings that don't correlate to your input. The game is still bugged. This doesn't fix it completely, but turning those off will make sure that your input is as least confused as possible. I can't believe I'm actually saying that. For infantry, traversal sprint is always on. I also double bind W to sprint. And on vehicles, I do have vehicle aim relative controls off. Those are kind of personal preference, but I find that to work best for me. I'm just going to let the rest of the video roll here for the keybinds, but I do want to note that when I actually start on gunner, I go to general, and then I finish on general or common, and then I finish on pilot, so don't get confused there. As for piloting, I do highly recommend binding pitch down to spacebar, pitch up to left control, and also putting roll left and roll right onto something that you're comfortable as well. If you're on mouse and keyboard, this will really cut down on mouse swipes and allow you to have continuous input when flying, and will just be less of a pain in general if you do that. So go ahead and copy the rest of these settings down as necessary. One more thing I do want to note about my keybinds is I do like to solo seat swap a lot in vehicles, so you'll notice I have mouse 3 set to seat number 2 and mouse 4 set to seat number 1. Just get something that's comfortable, put it on your mouse when you're using vehicles, makes it much easier. And scroll wheel between the weapons is also really nice. I keep scroll wheel on my vehicle seats for my air vehicles, but I keep it on my weapons for my tanks and transports. The rest of these settings are pretty much a repeat of what I covered before, so just go ahead and copy those as necessary. All of it's personal preference. I'm going to try steady scope on toggle since I rebounded to caps lock, so I'll give that a try. Revive interaction, all of that stuff's just personal preference. Next, I'll show you guys how I get my game to look the way it does. Shout out to Focus for introducing me to Reshade. I have thousands of hours on Overwatch, so I like nice, beautiful, bright colors. You're just going to want to download Reshade and launch the Battlefield 2042 EXE through Reshade. It's gonna ask you which rendering API you want to use. It's DirectX 10, 11, 12. I already have it downloaded, so it's gonna say modify or uninstall for me. Obviously, just go ahead and install it, push it through with the standard effects, and you're good to go. It's really pretty simple. Make sure you have Origin in-game disabled, otherwise it might cause problems with it. Other than that, it's very straightforward, very easy to use, and makes your game look beautiful. I'll show you guys a before and after of the reshade with my current settings, but I do also want to note that you can use digital vibrance if you have an Nvidia graphics card. I'm personally using 70 at the moment. I've gone up to as much as 100. I think that in combination with reshade, it doesn't need to go much higher than 70, but definitely check that out and set that to your personal preference. Here's the before and after with reshade off and then turned on. As you can see, it makes the game look much better. I'm using Lift Gamma Gain, Luma Sharpen, and Technicolor 1 and 2 on just the default settings. Okay, so moving on to the last part of the video with the PC optimizations. Here you can see me deleting all of the cache and all of the temp files. I will provide a paste bin in the description below for you guys to quickly be able to find these file locations. But essentially, you just want to delete all of these temp files and cache files every time you launch the game. And you do need to change administrator to your PC's username. So be sure to change that to whatever your profile's username is. Okay, now that I have the game launched, there's going to be 6 commands I type in. The first is the light tile command. Just type light tab 0. Simulation time, again, simulation tab. You have to enter a space for some reason after that. That unlocks your frames. And then there's 4 thread commands I set to 8, 16, 0, and 0. Essentially, the first one is your cores, the second one is your number of threads. If you have any more than 16, say you have 24, the highest you can go is 17, otherwise your game crashes. And then the last 2 you want to set to 0 as well. Again, these commands will be in the description, so go ahead and check that out, and you do have to type them in every time you launch the game, unfortunately. The last thing I want to show you guys is just how I get my HUD to be moved in and up off the bottom and sides of my screen. It's these 2 lines here in the prop save. I will link them in the description, but since we're currently not able to change the minimap size, I like to make these lines 0.9 and 0.8 and just move my HUD in towards the center of my screen a little more. It makes it easier to read. I do apologize that I kind of had to rush through this video. I wanted to originally split it into 2 videos, but I wanted to make this as concise as possible so I didn't waste anybody's time. I will attach my Discord in the description below if you guys have any other questions or need help with anything. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Peace!